I've got time.
Okay.
Any time. Maybe not
All right,
3
cool.
hours. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, probably not. We'll see how we go.
Yeah.
I'll just get rolling then.
Yeah.
So, you've got quite the diverse CV. You've worked in advertising. You're a restaurateur. When did you get the itch to write a novel?
I've always had the itch to write a novel, but I've never had the time. I've never had the headspace. So I spent a lot of time in the evil world of advertising, which was useful as a writer because it teaches you to write quickly, but it drained me mentally for fiction. I couldn't really spend time when I got home from my day writing fiction. And then when I went into the restaurant world, I had the time, but I suppose I was distracted by that. And it took me, I suppose, about 10 years in that to work up the routine to write a long form piece. And, I was helped by a certain pandemic to be forced to find the time. But it had always been an ambition of mine. I just had never been able to sit down and do it.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Empathize with that.
You've had similar distractions.
Similar distractions, but yes, you do eventually, carve out the time if it's precious to you, don't you?
Yeah, and I think maybe it takes a while for the story to want to come out.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably. I've made attempts at writing novels over the years, but I'd only really get through about maybe the first act in a novel, and then I'd lose interest or not be able to push through it. And I think when I sat down to write the first novel that got published, I was just ready to push through.
Who were some of the influences and inspirations that sort of got you on that path? Like, who were you reading at that time, and who was sort of inspiring you to get it done?
It's interesting because I've read, my reading habits had been sporadic over the years, but I had been a classic reader of British literary fiction, I think because I just love the language of it. And so I'd read every Ian McEwan book, but I'd also read a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and the sort of literary works that the world knows and loves. And then I got on this. I got into the habit of starting to read sort of more realist novels, and so I read Rachel Cusk, and I read Sally Rooney, and I realized in reading that one of the barriers that I always felt being an advertising copywriter, I suppose, that's where my writing training came from. I didn't do a literature degree or anything, but I found that when I was reading them, it just seemed more accessible because their prose wasn't so Oxford, Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
It was realist prose, and then I started to get into the Japanese authors, and there was one in particular that really made me think that I could do it that I could push through, because I thought it was not only was it a realist, but it also went into the fantastical and in a really crazy way, and that's Sayaka Murata.
Right.
There's a book of hers called Earthlings, which starts out a story about a girl who has been abused, and she's living unhappily in a foster family, and then as it goes toward the end, it goes into the fantastical and goes really bad very quickly, and I just love that. So I suppose it was a mix of having the time, but also reading the right people for me to realize that I just needed to push through, and that the prose that I could come up with was legitimate. I just had to find a story and a way to deliver it.
So that was your imposter syndrome writ large right there.
Yeah, it's imposter syndrome, but also it's probably just trying to find your voice.
Yes.
There's so many different ways to express yourself. And then I think what we tend to do is we tend to look at those people who are masters at it, and we set ourselves a standard that's shouldn't necessarily be applied to us, and that there are other authors out there who are doing great stuff and telling great stories, and they're using their voice, and it's not that Oxford Cambridge voice.
You've preempted my two next questions. First name, second name, your first novel. I guess it falls into the fantastical autofiction zone, and I remember you telling me about it at a writers' meetup, and explaining the hopping vampire concept to me, and I was wondering how the hell that was going to work.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, ties into, the themes of the book are very much framed around your journey finding your identity as a queer Chinese Australian growing up in far North Queensland underneath the Joh Bjelke-Petersen regime. So how did that voice develop, I guess, in those circumstances?
I suppose, I've thought about this a lot because, recently I've had the pundits look at my book, and they always come to me and they say, "Wow, you were really ambitious with that book. You really were out there with that concept, and it's bonkers." And they always say that about it. And I remember thinking when I was writing it that I wasn't actually being that ambitious with it. I thought that what I was doing was I was making use of the tools that I had, which was I could mimic a style. That's my advertising head. So I could look at genre fiction and I could mimic a style. And then also I could look at historical fiction and I could mimic a style. But then also I had this, I suppose, awareness of being in edit suites, doing TV commercials for so many years, that a story can be told through the juxtaposition of edits just as quickly and probably more efficiently than it can be in spelling the whole thing out. So, there was a period in advertising where there were lots of quick cuts in ads, and the audience was able to understand the story despite the fact that there was this crazy montage happening. So I just assumed if I did a montage style novel, if I wrote a montage style novel in that I wrote a series of vignettes and I put them together in an order that seemed to make sense, that the audience would follow that, and that was a very simple way to write a novel. So, in a way, I was making use of what I'd learned in the ad world, and also my naivety, I suppose, as a writer, made me think that I could do it that way, and that it wasn't that ambitious and crazy to mix genre, horror, body horror with literary fiction and historical fiction, and somehow make the thing work. Does that answer your question?
We'll keep going for sure.
It doesn't answer the North Queensland thing, I suppose.
I'm interested in the North Queensland thing too, because that's something that's it's definitely a through line in your character, and the way that you perceive the world and the way you write. You've got it must have been you grew up in. Did you grow up in Cairns, or were you?
No, I grew up in Proserpine.
But yes, okay.
But I was born in Innisfail, which is just south of Cairns.
South of Cairns, yeah. So that's like the 1970s mainly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mostly the 1970s.
1978 you were born, right?
I won't say exactly when I was born, but you can look at my
We'll
face
maintain
very
the
closely and
mystique.
try to
That's fine.
guess.
You're doing all right. Don't worry. That's the blessing.
Yeah, it was the 70s was my it was my primary school years. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I suppose it's partly to do with North Queensland, but also probably partly to do with living in a very small, in a regional town.
Yes.
When you grow up in a regional town, you have very few competitors, I suppose. I mean, the population's always smaller, so everybody's doing their own thing, and there are fewer people to compete with. So you can sort of rise to the top of your grade or something like that very easily, if you're smart enough. But then also, if you've got a niche that you're into, you can be good at that niche and be the best person in town at that niche. And so I always just felt that anything was possible, and that I could. I never felt cowed by the people ahead of me. And so that's, I guess, another way of saying, when people say I was ambitious with this novel, I don't think I was ambitious. I just felt like I could have a bash, and there's every chance that I could make it work.
Yep. Cool. So how much research into the family history did it take to sort of pull things together, and how closely does it hew to the actual events in your genealogy?
It's very close, I would say, to both my family and myself, although there's quite a lot of fiction in there, obviously. I'm not dead, so the protagonist that resembles me is obviously fiction. And then also family members, some of the events didn't happen, but similar events or lesser versions of those events did happen. I did a lot of research on my own, but I also had a distant family member who'd done a family tree and a family story that was also half Chinese, half Anglo, and the story was so close to mine that I was able to lean on I suppose, some of their research to make sure that what I was writing about, particularly Gold Rush and early 1900s in far north Queensland, that it was going to be authentic, because they'd done a lot of that work. Also, my father wrote a journal just before he died. I think he was rewriting history, to be honest. I think he wanted to write something that his children could remember him by.
Yes.
So I sort of took a lot of it with a grain of salt, but there was good detail in there. You know, the detail when you're writing a piece of historical fiction is what really makes it work. It's what really makes it human and seem vivid.
Yep.
And so I had that. And then, of course, I just lived for months and months and months in Trove. Trove is an amazing resource. Yeah, because you can go in there and you can, it's a digitized version of all the newspapers.
Yeah.
And so you can search people. I searched my own family, and I found things out about my family, the relatives of my father, that I didn't know, little misdemeanors that had happened, little accidents that had happened, social events that they went to, what people wore, who was there, little scandals from the towns that I was writing about. It's a marvelous resource. And so I spent a lot of time in there just picking and choosing things that would help me tell the story that I wanted to tell. It's great.
I do love Trove. Yes, it's a it's a rabbit hole and a half for sure. Tell me about, and I'm going to mangle this, the myth of the hopping vampire, the Jiangxi, and how that ties thematically to Stephen's journey from the morgue slab to back to his back home.
This is a long story. Okay, I can tell you how it came
All the time.
about.
Go.
I can tell you how it came about. So I had this idea that I wanted to tell the story from the perspective of the contemporary, the progeny of these two migrant families, the Chinese family and the Scottish family, who'd become one family, and this protagonist was the result of that union. I wanted to tell his story as if he was looking back, and I wanted to explore regret, the notion of regret, and regret becomes really very heightened at the deathbed. I'd watched a program about palliative care nurses, and they'd asked people what they regretted the most in their life, and the answer was always that the dying people hadn't been themselves. And so I thought, okay, that's a really useful insight, because I wanted to tell this story about racial and sexual self-loathing. And so I thought death is important in this story, and I'd like to look at it from the perspective of a dead man. So I then went looking into cemeteries, and I found a cemetery in far north Queensland, around up near Cooktown, where the people in the cemetery, or the people who are buried in the cemetery, are divided up amongst their denominational along denominational lines. And so there's you walk in the gate and the Catholics are to the right, and then behind them are all the Anglicans, and then to the left there might be a section set aside for the Anzacs, and there's another section set aside for like bushrangers and those sorts of people. And then right at the back of that cemetery, there's this Chinese shrine, and it's got a tourist board, a tourist sign beside it that says that most of the bodies that had been interred in that cemetery from the Chinese people from the gold rush, from the Palmer goldfields, they had been returned, the bodies had been returned to China, and full stop, and I thought that's really weird, because these bodies, most of them had been returned to China, but what happened to the rest? And I wondered then what the spiritual and mythical implications are to do with a body not being returned, and whether there would be any issues there. So that got me down into researching beliefs in China at the time, in the Qing dynasty, because that was around the time of the gold rush. And at that time, there were a lot of people overseas going to the gold rushes in, Big Gold Mountain, which is California, and Little Gold Mountain, which is in Australia. And then also they were working far away from home, displaced by regional conflicts and things. And when they died far away from home, there was a belief that if they didn't get, the body wasn't returned to the town of their birth, they would be not at rest. And so there was a mini industry set up where they would be returning the bodies back to the town of the birth, but they would have to, in some cases, walk them, because they didn't have enough money for a cart and horse or whatever. And so they would carry them suspended between two poles of bamboo. They would sort of maybe multiple bodies at the same time, and they would be carried in a line. And because the bamboo was flexing, they would be suspended upright, and they would be flexing up and right, up and down as they walked, and as the people carrying them walked. And so this ghastly image would be traveling through a village at night, usually because they like to travel at night, so that they didn't encounter too many other travelers, and also because they wanted to avoid the heat of the day, so they didn't decay too quickly. And so the myth then was born, this sort of grotesque sight, and it happened at the same time as some sort of political comments wanting to be made about Qing dynasty officials. So that's where the myth of the Jiangsu came about, and they were always dressed like Chinese officials.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, that's a really interesting idea. Also, the idea of a corpse being walked and then decay, I thought was a really great idea, a way to explore this self-loathing related to race, because race has so much to do with physical aspects. So eyes and hair and skin color. So I thought, look, it in my mind, it was a great way to demonstrate self-loathing by having this corpse walking and looking at himself falling apart and thinking of himself as disgusting. And then at the same time, this sort of mythical journey back through the night from the town in which he died, which was Brisbane, and the town that he was born in, which was Innisfail. And so therefore that's how that creature, that aspect of the story was born. And at the same time, I felt that if that's the spine of the story, then I need to build around that the backstory of his ancestors and his family, and even some of his life where things happened to him and he was able to reflect on them as he walked.
So this manuscript won the Glendower in 2023. Everyone that read it, I read it as well in a form, had their minds blown by it, and that got you publication with UQ Press. And yes. What was the process from when you won the Glendower through to publication like? With your advertising background, probably when to stick your oar in more than publishers would appreciate as well. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, my publisher she was very aware that I had this advertising background. So when it came to things like the cover design, which is something that obviously I would be like really into looking at, she showed me early designs and she entertained the idea of me having input, in that she said, which one of these do you like? And because I've spent so many years doing that very same thing, I knew that she put two ideas in there that were okay, and one that was an obvious winner. And so it was a really smooth process, because I could sort of appreciate that the one that they wanted was also the one that was the best. So it was fairly smooth. I was concerned about how I would exercise my role in the marketing equation, because I sort of didn't understand at that time what was involved in publishing a book. And now I know that yes, it has a lot to do with the marketing of the book, in that you have to choose the right strap line for it, and you have to the cover has to present it in a way that the market will, who are looking for the sort of triggers that they like to see in a book that they like, that has all of those elements. So that was discussed. Well, the big thing that I had no control over and also no expertise in was the sales equation, which is really, to me, that's the part that really ensures whether a book is a success or not. I mean, you can push as hard as you want to on the marketing side of things, but if it's not appearing in bookstores at the front of the bookstore, then you're really working against the tide. So, I concentrated on those elements that I could control. I tried my best to create an author image.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this guy, you know, so that when people saw the book, they did a quick Google search, they'd work out who this person was and what they represented, and maybe they'd find that interesting. You know, I did all those silly things like make sure that the author photo looked a bit mysterious and dark, because it's a mysterious and dark book.
Lurking in the forest.
And dark person. So, you know, there was a little bit of acting required there. And I did appreciate that the book cover that they went with had triggers for historical fiction people, and then it had also a little bit of a mysterious element, a set of shoes on the cover that had no person in them, and they looked like they were walking. So there was a suggestion there of the supernatural. So, you know, it had all it needed. Ultimately, it comes down to the sales force then, and how well they can sell the idea into a bookstore, and that's where there's some difficulty as well with a cross-genre novel.
Yes,
you know, because it's in a number of times I've been into a bookstore and I found it in the horror section, which is not where it should be. It's a literary fiction work or Australian fiction work. So I think horror people might be disappointed that there's not enough horror in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, those are the things that you learn as a debut.
How did you go with the editing process? Was that a new learning, or was that something you expected?
Garth, you're also from an advertising background, and you
I'm just throwing out bait here. I'm just throwing out bait.
Yeah, you've built up. Yeah, both of us have built up the ability to respond to a revision.
Yes,
and we have also. I'm assuming you're the same as me, but I learned very early on in my advertising career that I had enough ideas to be able to come back with something better if something was criticized, and that I couldn't be too precious about something that was down on paper. I know it took me effort to get it there, but if someone criticized it or asked a question about it, that was just a challenge to come up with something better. So I have a really positive experience with the editing. I enjoyed my book coming under that kind of scrutiny.
Yes,
it's great. You don't get that opportunity really ever, and to have someone like my editor was also great because he had intersectional crossovers in his life with me and my life. He was also Asian Australian and he was also gay. So he understood a lot of the storyline. He understood a lot of the feelings expressed in the book. And he was very sensitive about some of the things that I expected. He's turned on to some of the things that I expected might not be understood by just any editor. And so I think it came through the process fairly much intact. Of course, there are lots of questions about prose, and there's two levels of edit. There's the structural edit, which talks about the basic ideas in the book and the flow and the pacing, and then there's the line edit, which talks about every sentence. And some people might get afraid of the person going through and looking at every single sentence and questioning the appropriateness of every verb or adjective and how many adverbs there are and whether that should be an em dash or a semicolon. But I'm not like that. I just really enjoyed the scrutiny.
You were shortlisted for the Miles Franklin recently, and my big question is, do they give you the secret handshake to the secret bacchanals when you're shortlisted, or is there something else that you need to do to actually get into those events?
Do you mean once you're shortlisted,
the eyes wide shut situation? Do you get into the secret club, or?
Yeah, look, I haven't. It's too early to tell.
Too early to tell.
I did notice when I was longlisted, I was invited to I had already been invited to Sydney Writers Festival, and I'd spent the previous year going to different festivals and being in the green room. Green room in festivals is always full of other authors milling about, getting ready for their sessions. Sometimes they're just there to just hang out and get a little bit of breathing space from the general public who often crowd them out or want to ask them too many questions. So they just like to sort of chill there, but also they like to chat to other authors because it's really a stimulating place to be. And I did find that in my previous year, when I went to the green room, I would have to explain to a lot of people who I was and what the book I had written was about, and there were most people were really nice. Some occasionally you sort of get fobbed off because people obviously didn't relate to the book, or they didn't relate to me. But I did find that when I went to Sydney as a long lister, people knew who I was, or they knew that I'd been longlisted, and so therefore they could take me seriously in that environment. That not that I wouldn't still say the same stupid things that I would normally say, but that I had been vetted, I suppose, for my seriousness.
Yes.
Which is good for me because my book has been called bonkers before, So
I was going to say, yeah, bonkers in that company, like, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, and it's great. It is great in a way to be seen by a literary crowd for a book that is in some ways thumbing its nose a bit at literary traditions.
Yes.
Because I was audacious enough to throw in a Chinese hopping vampire into a Bildungsroman. It's not usually what's done.
So the Australian literary scene's in pretty rude health, right? Based on what you've seen lately. And who are some of your faves at the moment in that zone?
I've started to develop almost like a little posse of Asian Australians, which is kind of cool because I didn't think that's what I was heading for.
Right.
But I'm great mates with Xiang Lu. And also I'm great mates with Mirandi Riwo, and both of those are Brisbane authors, Chinese Australian authors. And like we have like another language.
Yes.
I went to AusAsia in Adelaide, and Sammy Shah was the sort of chairman or the organizer of that. And at his opening night address, he said, he sort of looked around the room. So at AusAsia, it's East Asian and South Asian authors all gather to talk about their books. And on his opening night address, he said, "Do you feel it?" And we all looked around the room and we all nodded, because it was a different green room to be going into, where you're not seen as a diversity author.
Sure.
You're just, you're the
Community.
mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With your people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's been amazing. But also, like, I've had such good luck with festivals in the first year. I got to be on a panel with Christos Chokis, and I have read all of his books and admired him from afar, and was able to have like conversations, author to author conversations with him. That's great. I also really love the guys from Sweatshop Western Sydney.
Yep.
Michael Muhammad Ahmed has been a really amazing mentor. He's for me in that he's kind of guided me. He guided me through a previous novel that didn't go anywhere, but also he's been very helpful with just me navigating some of the new stuff that's been happening, that happens to you when you've got a debut out there. So I really admire those people. I've sat in a couple of their workshops, which are intense and like incredible.
Yeah, I think you
Tough.
directed me towards a piece of his that was terrifying in terms of
Yeah,
the approach to, a new author and how you
yeah. He
break him
doesn't
down,
muck around.
basically. Like
Does not
military sort
doesn't
of.
don't you don't try to bullshit that man.
No.
You know, he is very serious about what he's doing, and also very very worthy. He's got a very worthy agenda. He is humanizing the migrant, and he just wants the migrant voice to be as good as it can possibly be. So yeah, he's been amazing.
I guess, yeah, I was about to veer off into another direction, but yeah, I guess that raises the question of literature and getting people to read in the era of rising far right politics, and how
Yeah.
what your ambitions are in terms of, pushing back that tide through your work.
Yeah. I mean, if I can borrow from the sweatshop model, I'd say that the only answer to that is to just tell authentic stories and claim the voice as well. If you read any of the novels of the sweatshop Western Sydney crew, that's novels like um, Muhammad Ahmed's The Lebs, or Winnie Dunn's book Dirt Poor Islanders, or Shirley Lee's book Funny Ethnics.
Yep.
There is a voice in that is uncompromisingly migrant Australian, in that it doesn't try to be, again, that I keep banging on about that Oxford Cambridge voice. It doesn't try to be that. It's more the voice that you would hear in the street,
Yes.
and the construction of the sentences, the punchiness of it. In Muhammad's work, it just sounds like a Western Sydney Leb speaking, and why not?
Mm.
So I would say that always what I'll try to do with my books is to be authentic. And that's not easy, because I've come from an advertising background and I kind of know what people want. And do I then write what people want? That's my tendency. That's my training. No, I can't. And so therefore, just sort of have to drill down and find what it is that I'm trying to say, and say it in the way that's as authentic as I can say it. I think that's probably the only answer to that, because there are. I'm never going to write a didactic book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just more interested in, I used to say this back in the day, but I'm more interested in dancing people to the door than pushing them through the door.
Sure.
So I just think fiction is great for that. You can just tell a story and you can get people caught up in your story.
All right, then let's switch gears to poo.
Take a shitty turn.
Take a shitty turn. Your alter ego Stephen released a kids' book called "Make Them Say Poo" earlier this year.
Yes.
What drew you to kids' books? I guess it sort of reflects that question about: are you looking at making it reading fun to encourage kids to get in there and stir their parents up with the?
I mean, I wrote it as a I suppose to lighten up. I found writing first name, second name quite a heavy experience, probably because it was auto-fictional, and I was digging in on feelings that I had, and I was trying to explore them, and so I found that quite heavy. And then I wrote the children's book thinking I needed a break, but then having thought about that, I think also there is this idea that we always have to be worthy, and that children's books always have to be worthy, and that migrant stories always have to be worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so why not just
in the toilet,
have the ability to pivot to toilet humor, or to be, I mean, it's not all toilet humor. There is an educational component to it, in that the word poo is hidden within other words. So it does teach kids to look at the construction of words. But yes, it's a jokey book, and it's lighthearted, and it is also triggering for parents. So therefore, it's a little bit establishment, a little bit subversive, all those things that I like. And that's why I wrote it. It was a little break, I suppose, from the heaviness of writing worthy literary fiction.
I donated it to the school library, and the reaction came pretty outstandingly positive. What reaction have you gotten in the field from parents and kids?
Yeah, I mean, I hear from parents, and usually it's a guilty pleasure that they've been able to buy that book for their kid because they can see that it's funny. I mean, we're all kids. We were kids. We're still, some of us still are kids. Mostly, and so we can appreciate how that book works. You don't always feel like you can be a kid, but that book has allowed some parents to get in. That's the thing with it. It lets the parent get in on the joke. It invites the parent in on the joke to make fun of themselves. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of good responses about it. It's done very well to the point where it's been, the follow-up went straight through acquisitions.
Right, great.
And it's scheduled for next year. And there's no spoilers because the follow-up is actually mentioned in the end of the book anyway.
I think we should force people to buy the book before they get that information.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So next year's sequels. Yeah.
Yeah, the sequel is it's on its way.
That is very exciting. I can't wait to introduce that to the kids at Green School as well. So you've got your alter ego, Stephen.
Yes.
And you've got literary fiction author, Steve MinOn.
Yes.
How do you go about distinguishing those two? And I guess it's pretty much a redundant question, but does one sort of make an appearance at inopportune times, or is it just by the persona?
You're talking a Tourette's situation. Look, Stephen is the name that my mother uses when I've been naughty. So I think I wanted to make a distinction between the two people. Stephen, the children's book author who writes naughty books, and then Steve MinOn, who writes literary fiction. But you do that because you want to you don't want to confuse people or preempt what they think they might be buying, but also it just adds to the playfulness. I mean, I really do believe that we can be both things at once. We can have different aspects to our personality. We don't always have to be boxed into that same personality. So having a name like Steve gives me that opportunity. I'm just going to take it. Why not?
I guess you and I talk a bit about social media strategy, and
yes,
you've got some followers would be surprised to sort of happen upon Stephen's work, and vice versa in that context. But do you think that putting the energy into social media pays off for authors?
I don't know if it pays off as much, or I don't think there's as much you can control it so that it pays off as much as you think that you can. I think you have to leave it up to a lot of luck and just the algorithm and maybe connections to really make it. I think my social media has really taken off, mostly started to take off when I started to do collaborations. And so the way I did that was I went to a lot of launches of other people's books, and I took photographs for them, and then I posted them online and I on my Instagram, and then I collaborated with them.
Yeah.
And what it does is it does what social media is designed to do, which is to take the Venn diagram of you and mix it with the Venn diagram of the other person, and there will be crossover in the middle, but there'll be some people outside of that. So, I suppose if you understand how social media works, then you need to understand how social media works so that you can push those levers. So that's one of the levers that I've been pushing. And I don't think there's a return on investment, and I don't think there's necessarily, like, I don't think the time is better spent than, say, just finishing a novel.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend a lot of time on social media, and I spend far too much, especially the sort of, you're looking for the endorphin rush of being noticed, and that's time wasted.
Yes.
I think coming up with content is not time wasted, but
No.
just constantly checking and double checking that you're getting the likes that you need. I don't know whether that's well spent time at all. I don't think it is. I think it's necessary, social media, but I don't think, I think you just have to know what the basic rules are and methods are, and just utilize all of those, and just hope that things are going to work out for you, and that maybe you might have something that might go viral somehow. But even then, I took a photograph of David Malouf's house, his old house that he wrote about in his book Jono, on the day of his death, or when it was announced, and I took the photograph because it's just across the road from where I live, and then I posted it, and I wrote the story about how I always look across at that house when I'm writing, and I suppose it was a combination of the house, the fondness for David Malouf, the connection with someone who is writing as well, that went viral.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't gain that many followers from it. It got something like 137,000 likes, and maybe I got 100 followers from it.
Yeah, I guess there are no rules, unlike when you're dealing with like quantifiable things like ad spends and ad buys and things like that, because they can change at the turn of the old algo switch.
Yeah. And you and I are used to doing that. We're used to looking at media buy and frequency and reach and all that sort of stuff, and knowing that you can manipulate it with just money.
But no one's just going to turn the TV off, and you can't use the TV anymore to advertise on.
Yeah.
And you find out, a fortnight later that all the TVs have been turned off. But that's fine. Is it still frustrating to Google image search yourself and come up with a bunch of links to annoying yellow cyclopses?
Yeah.
You haven't killed that one yet. That you need to work harder at that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that has been useful. When I was trying to work out the cover of first name, second name, I thought, now I'm going to do something with my name typographically. I'm going to put a capital O in the word MinOn. And I wanted to do it as an experiment to see if it would make it easier for people to say the name, but also that they wouldn't mix it up with Minion, because it's like it's just a little design thing that makes you pay attention and you concentrate. And I have found that it's been useful.
I hate to break it to you, but my 8-year-old sees the cover of your book and says Minion. So
yeah. Oh, well, there you go.
But that's she's just poorly educated. Don't worry.
Well,
we're still working on that.
Also, minions are probably in her dominion.
Less so. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the lack of exposure to minions she's had. But definitely, there's a cross-pollination at school that you can't avoid, because there's boys, and they've got shit taste.
Yeah.
I guess wrapping up, what is coming next from the mind of?
Well, I'm writing another adult novel, and it's Struggle Street. And I'll tell you why it's Struggle Street, because prior to being shortlisted for the Miles Franklin, I was carefree. And now that I've been shortlisted for the Miles Franklin, I feel like I need to write something that's serious and
oh my God.
that people will people will see I've been paying attention to. Whereas that's not how I wrote first name, second name. And I've got to get back into the head. So it's going to take some adjustment to get back into the
Yes.
headspace to put that aside, because it is a sort of a major thing in an author's life to be shortlisted
Absolutely.
for an award like that. It does change things emotionally.
All
So
eyes
yeah,
are on that.
I'm about to. I mean, I go back to my desk every day, and I continue to write this book that I'm trying to write, and I'm pushing through, because the one thing I did learn, and I'll have to keep reminding myself, is unless you push through and finish the damn thing, you've got nothing to work with. You can't fix it, even if you can't fix an unfinished thing except by finishing it.
Yes. Yep.
So that's what I'm doing.
Grappling with the weight of the Australian literary establishment.
I'm trying to put that I'm trying to put that at the back of my mind. Really.
Yeah, a lot of empathy there. Where can people find you online?
SteveMinOn.com. Oh yeah, I'm on Instagram at SteveMinOn.
Yep.
I've got a very it's great to have a name like Steve MinOn, because I was instantly able to get all of the URLs that I needed to.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Guth.